Hello everyone. Welcome to the analysis of the part 5 of the Budget and Economic Survey. In the last week, I had covered the part 4 of the Budget and Economic Survey, in which I had covered the theme of external sector. In this particular week, that is in the part 5, I shall be covering the themes of agriculture as well as industry. In the next week, that is the last part of the Budget and Economic Survey, I will be covering the remaining themes, which include infrastructure, services, as well as inclusive growth. So let's start with the analysis of the first theme, that is the theme of agriculture. Before discussing the theme of agriculture from the Budget and Economic Survey, let's first see as to how questions have been asked in the previous year prelims from the theme of agriculture sector. And that is basically how many questions have been asked, from where the questions have been asked, and then we will start our analysis. As you can see, in the last 14 years, almost 27 questions have been asked from agriculture, which means on an average, you could expect 1 or 2 questions every year from agriculture. For example, in prelims 2024, there was one question, and this question was with respect to Digital India Land Records Modernization Program. In prelims 2023, there were 2 questions. One question was with respect to cultivation of Niger seed, which is one type of oil seed. And there was another question with respect to small farmers, large field. And in 2022, there was a question with respect to which among the states are the tea producing states in India. So these are some of the questions which have been asked in the last 5-year prelims. If you carefully analyze the questions which have been asked, you must understand that they are not very random questions. Rather, some of these things were actually in news. That is, they were in current developments. For example, Digital India Land Records Modernization Program, even though it is quite an old scheme or the policy of the government, this was a news because the government has expedited the process of modernization of land records. Niger seed cultivation was in news. In fact, there was an article in Dawn to Earth magazine which highlighted that the overall production and cultivation of Niger seed in the last few years has drastically reduced. Small farmer large field was basically news in the context of one of the biggest structural problem of Indian agriculture, which is fragmented land holding. And with respect to tea producing states, it was in news in 2022 because the government had proposed to replace the old Tea Act with a new Tea Act in 2022. So broadly, what I can tell you here is, with respect to analysis of the previous year questions, you have to keep yourself updated with the current affairs development in agriculture. And those current affairs development, you would actually get it from the budget as well as economic survey. Apart from that, if you see the nature of questions which have been asked in the last 14 years, questions are generally asked with respect to marketing of agricultural produce, trends, and the last one is schemes and initiatives, which actually constitute a large chunk of questions. With respect to schemes and initiatives, see, government implements large number of schemes and initiatives for agriculture. So it is humanly impossible to remember all the schemes and initiatives. So what I would suggest is you have to focus upon the schemes and initiatives which are in news. That is basically from budget and economic survey. With respect to trends, questions have been repeatedly asked with respect to production, cultivation, imports, and exports of important agricultural commodities. That obviously you'll get to know from economic survey. So, based upon the careful analysis of the previous year questions, we will take up the budget and economic survey in the similar fashion, where we will give more prominence to the schemes and initiatives which are in news, the important trends in agriculture sector. All of these things we will be covering. So let's start with the trends in agriculture. See, in case of India, when we categorize different sectors of the economy, there is one way of categorizing the sectors. That is, we can categorize the sectors as agriculture sector, industrial sector, and services sector. In such a categorization, can you see where is mining placed at? Mining is actually included in the industrial sector, right? So let's focus on the agriculture sector here. When you see the agriculture sector almost contributes 18% to India's GDP. Industrial sector contributes somewhere around 28% to GDP. Services sector contributes 54% to India's GDP. That is a contribution of the sectors in terms of GDP. And if you see the contribution of sectors in terms of employment, job creation, agriculture sector accounts for 46% of employment. And when you see the industrial sector accounts for 24%, and services sector accounts for 30% of the job creation. So this is what is the present status of contribution of agriculture sector to India's GDP as well as the job creation. So agriculture sector is quite significant, particularly from the perspective of the contribution of employment, which is almost 46% of India's workforce. Now let's see what has happened with respect to trends in the contribution of agriculture sector to India's GDP as well as employment in the last one decade. Apart from that, there's another thing. See, there is another way of categorizing the sectors in the economy. The second way of categorizing the sectors is primary, secondary, and tertiary. And can you see, when we categorize the sectors as primary, secondary, and tertiary, mining is actually included in the primary sector. It gets included in the primary sector. The reason is, primary sector includes all the activities which are directly based upon the nature. So some of you might get confused here. That is why I have to include two ways of categorizing the sectors. Mining is part of industrial sector when we classify like this, and when we classify the sectors as primary, secondary, and tertiary, mining is part of the primary sector. With respect to the trends in the contribution of agriculture sector, what you should know is, if you see the contribution of agriculture sector to India's GDP since 1991, that is since LPG reforms, the contribution has actually got reduced. However, in the last one decade, the contribution of agriculture sector has remained constant at somewhere around 17 to 18%. That's a first thing. Second, if you observe the table very carefully, within the agriculture sector, you have crops, livestock, forestry, and fishing. Among these four subsectors of agriculture, we can very well observe that crops account for the largest share in terms of contribution. But one important development which has taken place in the last decade is the share of crops sector to agriculture sector has reduced, and the share of livestock sector to agriculture sector has increased. Even now, crops account for the largest share as compared to livestock, but the share of crops has got reduced and the share of livestock sector has increased in the last decade. That is what you should know with respect to the agricultural sector. As far as industrial sector is concerned, you can very well observe that in the last one decade, the share of industrial sector to India's GDP has reduced. In particular, if you focus on the manufacturing sector, the share of manufacturing sector to India's GDP is almost stagnant between 14 to 17%. That is with respect to manufacturing. And lastly, when you look at the services sector, with respect to services sector, the share of services sector has increased from 49% to somewhere around 54%. So this is the broad trend in terms of contribution of different sectors. Now let's see what is the trend in terms of agricultural growth rate. In terms of growth rate, you can compare the growth rate of agriculture sector in different decades. For example, you can see at what particular rate agriculture sector is growing for the decade of 1984 to 1993, 1994 to 2003, or the most recent decade, that is 2014-15 to 23-24. If you see that this decade, that is 2014 to 2024, this particular decade coincides with the rule of the present NDA government. And it is being said that for this particular decade, the average annual growth rate of agriculture sector, the average annual growth rate, this has been highest since 1980s. Apart from that, if you see for 7 consecutive years, that is from 2017 to 2024, for 7 consecutive years, our agriculture sector has registered a growth rate of more than 5%. And this is for the first time since 1947, that is since our independence, that agriculture sector for straight 7 consecutive years, it has registered a growth rate of 7%. So because the agriculture sector has registered such a phenomenal growth rate, the income levels of the farmers have increased, as you can see here. Now, where can you use these things? Probably you can use these as fodder points in your mains answers, or if you are appearing for the interview and if you are required to critically analyze the government policies with respect to agriculture, you could probably utilize this particular point in favor of how government policies have brought about certain benefits for the Indian agriculture. Apart from that, like I said, within the agriculture sector, you have different subsectors like crops, livestock, fishery, forestry, and so on. Among the different subsectors, you can see in the last 1 decade, the sector which has registered the highest growth rate is actually fisheries. And the sector which has registered the lowest growth rate is actually oilseeds. This becomes important for your prelims examination. Let's look at the land use pattern. Now, before understanding land use pattern, there are 2 important concepts that you should be aware of. One is net sown area and the other one is gross cropped area. So let's understand what is net sown area and gross cropped area by looking into a specific example. Let's say I am a farmer and I might own 4 acres of agricultural land. On this entire 4 acres of agricultural land, I am sowing crops on the entire 4 acres. And it might so happen that out of these 4 acres of agricultural land, on 2 acres, I might be sowing crops more than once in a year. When I say more than once, it might mean that I'm sowing crops in Kharif season as well as Rabi season. So I'm sowing crops more than once, right? So keeping in mind this particular thing, let's understand what is net sown area. Net sown area is simply what is the total land under cultivation. What is the total land under cultivation here? Total, it is 4 acres. So that is what is the net sown area. However, if you see gross cropped area is calculated as net sown area plus area which is sown more than once in a year. So that way, in this specific example, gross cropped area becomes 4 plus this 2 acres is sown more than once. So total gross cropped area becomes 6 acres. So what you must understand is, when we calculate gross cropped area, we'll do multiple counting of the area which is sown more than once. But while calculating net sown area, we don't do multiple counting. That is a fundamental difference. So based upon this, can you actually see that gross cropped area is net sown area plus area which is sown more than once? So gross cropped area can be equal to net sown area if area sown more than once is equal to 0, or gross cropped area can be greater than net sown area. It cannot be less than the net sown area. That is one important concept that you have to understand. So gross cropped area is always equal to or more than the net sown area. Based upon this concept, we can calculate an important parameter in agriculture which is called as cropping intensity. Cropping intensity is calculated as gross cropped area divided by net sown area. That is what is the cropping intensity. So keeping this thing in mind, let's look at the net sown area, gross cropped area and other things from the perspective of Indian agriculture. If you see the net sown area of Indian agriculture, it is around 141 million hectare. The total geographical area of India is 326 million hectare, out of which the land which is under cultivation is 141 million hectare. And what is the most interesting thing is that the net sown area has remained stagnant since 1988. Since 1988, the net sown area in India has not increased at all. But when you see the gross cropped area, this is around 220 million hectares for India. Gross cropped area is net sown area plus area sown more than once. So area sown more than once, if you include, gross cropped area is actually higher. And in the last 1 decade, the gross cropped area has increased. Why it has increased? Because area sown more than once has increased. So if you calculate cropping intensity, you can do the maths. Cropping intensity is gross cropped area divided by net sown area. You'll get to know what exactly is the cropping intensity of the Indian agriculture. So this is a basic concept, that net sown area and gross cropped area. And please do remember the trends also. So that is what I have mentioned in the PPT as well. So that is a trend. And when you look at the ownership of agricultural land, see, based upon how much land the farmers own, farmers are categorized into different types. Marginal farmer owns less than 1 hectare. Small farmer owns 1 to 2 hectare. Semi-medium owns 2 to 4 hectare. Medium farmer owns 4 to 10 hectare. And a large farmer owns more than 10 hectares of agricultural land. That is how you categorize the farmers based upon how much land they own. It is being said that Indian agriculture is dominated by small and marginal farmers. That is the farmers who own less than 2 hectares of agricultural land. In fact, the small and marginal farmers account for 86% of the total farmers, and they together own 48% of agricultural land. And all of you must be knowing the problems faced by small and marginal farmers, right? The small and marginal farmers face problem with respect to accessing inputs. The yield of the small land holdings is quite lower, right? So please have a look at this question, which is asked in prelims 2023. Now, what I would say is, even though some of you might even not know as to what is the concept of small farmer, large field, but if you just know that Indian agriculture is dominated by small and marginal farmers, and to solve the problems of small and marginal farmers, we need to organize them into cooperatives, right? If you know that, you can easily get the right answer to this question, which happens to be option B. Now let's take up a practice question here. If the gross cropped area is more than the net sown area, what does it necessarily denote? The word which is important is necessarily. What does it necessarily denote? Gross cropped area is net sown area plus area sown more than once. So if gross cropped area is more than the net sown area, it means that there is increase in the area which is sown more than once. Some of you might be tempted to choose option B, that is adoption of mixed farming by the farmers. What is mixed farming, by the way? Mixed farming means on same parcel of land, simultaneously you are growing multiple crops. Simultaneously you are growing crops, multiple crops at the same time. That is what is mixed crop farming. Mixed farming does not lead to increase in cropped area, right? Because the area is still sown only once only, except the fact that instead of growing one crop, you are growing multiple crops. That is the only difference. But if the option, instead of adoption of mixed farming, if the option was crop rotation, then you could say possibly yes, because in terms of crop rotation, what actually happens is you grow crops in one season, and after you harvest the crops, immediately in the next season you grow another crops. So that could be a possibility, but you don't have to worry because I have not included that option of crop rotation. The next question is, look at this practice MCQ number 2. There has been increase in the cropping intensity in India in the last decade. Cropping intensity obviously has increased because, like I said, gross cropped area has increased in the last decade, but net sown area has remained constant. So cropping intensity has increased. The net sown area has increased in the last decade. The second statement is incorrect. So right answer is statement 1 is correct, but statement 2 is incorrect. Let's now look at the next topic of farmer producer organizations. Why is this topic important? As you can see the heading here, recently Prime Minister Modi declared that government has finally achieved its objective of organizing farmers into 10,000 FPOs across India. Apart from that, this year's economic survey makes a special mention about a farmer producer company based in Maharashtra. In that context, the topic becomes important. Apart from that, some of you must be knowing that government has come up with an objective of having Lakpati Didis. Lakpati Didis objective is quite simple: organizing women into SHGs so as to financially empower the women. So this was the objective of the government, to have Lakpati Didis. Accordingly, can you see in prelims 2023, a question on SHGs was asked. I could apply the same logic. Now the focus of the government is on organizing farmers into FPOs. So similar to what UPSC has asked on SHGs, we may expect a question on farmer producer organizations. So what exactly are farmer producer organizations and why do we even need them? For example, let's say I'm a small and marginal farmer. As a small and marginal farmer, I would have problems with respect to accessing inputs, problems with productivity, and problems with prices. What kind of problems? Let's start with inputs. See, if I'm a small and marginal farmer and if I'm approaching a bank to take loans, banks might find it more risky to give me loans. So I might not be able to get loans easily. Apart from that, the land records in India are not modernized. So I might not get the credit easily. If I don't get credit, I will not be able to make investment in agriculture. So rather than focusing on commercial cultivation, I would rather focus on subsistence farming. Secondly, because I'm a small and marginal farmer, I cannot adopt machines. I cannot use advanced technology. Because of that, the per acre yield, per acre productivity of agriculture land will be lower. Thirdly, if I go to sell agriculture produce in the market, in that particular case, because I have less marketable surplus, I do not have bargaining power. So I would be exploited by the trader in the mandis. So to address these multifaceted problems faced by small and marginal farmers, the government is trying to organize these farmers into farmer producer organizations. The idea behind here is unity is strength, self help. So farmers are coming together as a group. And if they come together as a group, think how are these problems solved? If they have to purchase inputs, let's say everyone is growing same crops. Obviously, they'll have same inputs in terms of seeds, fertilizers. So they will purchase inputs in bulk. If they're purchasing inputs in bulk, they can get the inputs at a lesser prices. Banks will be more interested to give loans to group rather than a individual farmer because risk of lending loan to a group is considerably less as compared to lending loan to a farmer. We as a group, we can actually come together, purchase machines, we can invest in technology, so the productivity of agriculture land will be obviously higher. Thirdly, when we produce agriculture commodities, we can aggregate the agriculture commodities, and when we go to sell in the mandis, because we have more marketable surplus, we'll have more bargaining power as with respect to the trader. So we can get a far higher price. Not just that, as farmers, what we can also do is when we produce some agricultural commodities, we can do a value addition to those agricultural commodities as well. Like if you are growing potatoes, we can process the potatoes into potato chips. If you are growing oranges, oranges can be processed into say orange squash or juice. That is what we can very well do. So by doing that, we can get more amount of prices or income. That is the basic idea behind organizing farmers into farmer producer organization. But what exactly is an FPO? Well, what you must understand is FPO can be registered as a cooperative. It can be registered as a society or it can be registered as a company as well. So please understand FPO is a generic name. It's a generic name. FPO can be in the form of a cooperative, it can be in the form of a society, or it can be in the form of a company as well. If FPO is in the form of company, we will call it as farmer producer company. For your prelims, what is important is the exact difference between a cooperative and farmer producer company. So let's understand the difference between the two. Cooperative is registered under the Cooperative Society Act of the concerned state government. But farmer producer company is registered as companies under the Companies Act. Second, the area of operation of cooperative is limited to the state in which it is registered. But area of operation of farmer producer company is across India because it is obviously a company. Third, in cooperative, only individuals and other cooperatives can become members of cooperatives. So a small cooperative can become a member of larger cooperative. But what is interesting is in FPC, individuals can become members, cooperatives can become members, or any other association of members like SHGs, joint liability groups, even they can become members of farmer producer company. In fact, smaller for FPCs can become members of larger FPC also. That is one important difference. In cooperatives and farmer producer companies, shares are non-tradable. Non-tradable basically means you cannot do a trading of shares of cooperatives and farmer producer companies on the stock exchanges. It is not possible. But the shares of farmer producer company, they can be transferable. What do you mean by transferable? Let's say I'm a member of a farmer producer company and I want to exit the farmer producer company. So while exiting the farmer producer company, I can transfer, I can sell my share to any other member of FPC. So what is happening here? There is a transfer of share from one member to another member. But trading on stock exchanges, that is not possible. Voting right. Both will function on the principle of one member, one vote. But one of the most important difference is in case of cooperatives, you have the government and register of cooperative societies. They can exercise veto power in the decisions of cooperatives. But in FPCs, government does not has much influence. So that way you can say that FPCs, they enjoy more independence, more autonomy as compared to cooperatives. Further, in cooperatives, non-active members who are not really very active, they can also exercise their voting rights. But in farmer producer company, there's a rule that members who are involved in transactions with FPC, only those members can exercise the vote. So if there are certain farmers who are involved in let's say aggregating their marketable surplus, only those farmers can exercise votes. A non-active farmer cannot exercise vote on a farmer producer company. Usually the tax benefits for cooperatives is higher as compared to the farmer producer companies. And what I would want to tell you is you may look at differences in different sources, but whatever differences that I'm showing it to you, it's directly from the horse mouth, that is NABARD. So directly from NABARD, I picked up the differences. So if at all UPSC would ask a question, it would ask a question from official source, and that is the official source. With respect to the initiatives of the government, with respect to promotion of FPOs, there is one biggest initiative of the government, which is Central Sector Scheme for formation and promotion of 10,000 FPOs. What is this Central Sector Scheme? If you see India, within India, there are certain production clusters where certain crops are grown. Example being, in certain parts of India, let's say more fruits and vegetables are grown. In some other parts, turmeric may be grown. In some other part, oranges can be grown. So what we are doing under this scheme is we are identifying those production clusters. In these production clusters, we are bringing together farmers to form FPOs. Once the farmers have formed FPOs, the government is providing them with necessary financial and technological support. So this is the scheme. And because it is central sector scheme, 100% funding is given by the central government. With respect to the agencies who are involved in implementing the scheme, it is Small Farmers Agribusiness Consortium, SFAC, NABARD, state government, National Cooperative Development Corporation. All these institutions are involved in implementation of the scheme. Another thing which is important from the perspective of your prelims is SFAC is a nodal agency for creation of FPOs. This can be important. So please make a note of this. SFAC is also implementing a credit guarantee scheme for FPOs. Under this credit guarantee scheme, if banks give loans to FPOs, SFAC is guaranteeing the repayment of loans to the banks on behalf of FPOs, which means if FPOs fail to repay the loans to the bank, SFAC will repay the loans on behalf of the FPOs to the banks. That is the basic idea. So this will encourage banks to give out more loans to the FPOs. NABARD, as you can see, NABARD has also come out with two initiatives, which is Producer Organization Development Fund and the Produce Fund. You can go to the details. Let's take up the practice MCQ number 3 here. Both farmer producer companies and cooperatives are registered under the Cooperative Societies Act. It is incorrect because cooperatives are registered under the Cooperative Societies Act, but farmer producer companies are registered as companies under the Companies Act. Unlike cooperatives, FPCs allow both registered and unregistered groups such as SHGs to become members. Yes. There is less scope for political interference in functioning of FPCs as compared to cooperatives. As we covered, it is right. So the answer in this case is 2 and 3 only. Now with respect to the farmer producer company, which is based in Maharashtra, Economic Survey makes a special mention about this particular farmer producer company. See, as a farmer producer company, what this FPC has done is it is in turn supporting more than 600 farmer producer companies in Maharashtra. This FPC has set up collection centers and primary processing centers in the villages. So it is procuring the food grains and other important crops from other FPOs. And after procuring them, it is enabling the FPOs to sell the food grains and other crops directly to the food processing industries. By doing so, this farmer producer company is eliminating the middlemen as well as intermediaries, thus ensuring that FPOs in Maharashtra are getting more prices. Further, another important thing mentioned by Economic Survey is this particular farmer producer company has become one of the largest center for procurement of food grains. So this is a classical example of how one farmer producer company is supporting a smaller farmer producer organizations. Probably this kind of model can be replicated at a national level as well. So you can use this as a fodder point while writing answer in the mains exam. Now coming to the schemes related to modernization of land records. Why is this important? Two reasons. Number one, in prelims 2024, there was a question with respect to Digital India Land Records Modernization Program. Second, recently, government has launched a new scheme for modernization of land records, which is called as NAKSHA scheme. That is why it becomes important. For that, let's start with SVAMITVA scheme, which is in news actually. If you look at the full form of SVAMITVA scheme, it is survey of villages and mapping with improvised technology in village areas. That is a full form. What is the need for this scheme? And then we'll discuss the features. So you know that people in rural areas, they own houses, they own property. But the problem here is these people do not have property card to establish their ownership over the rural houses. Lack of property card in turn causes a number of problems. Problem number one, these people cannot use their house as a collateral to take loans from the banks. Problem number two, it leads to unnecessary litigations in property. Problem number three, it imposes higher burden on the judiciary because ultimately the cases will go to judiciary. Problem number four, you know that local bodies such as Panchayati Raj institutions are empowered to collect property tax. But if they do not have modernized property records, it becomes difficult for local bodies to collect the property tax. So to address these multifaceted problems, we have come up with SVAMITVA scheme. What are we doing under this scheme? Look at the word survey of villages. By using drones, we are undertaking survey of rural abadi areas. After undertaking the survey, look at the second part, mapping with improvised technology. We are preparing GIS based maps of the rural areas. So first we undertake survey of villages, then we prepare a map of the rural areas, and then lastly we update the property records. Once the property records are updated to the people in the rural areas, we issue property card. By issuing property card, remember all the problems that I discussed before, all the problems can be easily resolved. But there are some very interesting things that you need to know with respect to SVAMITVA scheme. First interesting thing, SVAMITVA scheme is limited only to rural areas. It is not for urban areas. Second interesting thing, within the rural areas, SVAMITVA scheme is focusing only on rural abadi areas. That is where people are actually living. We are not providing the property card for the agricultural land. Please remember this. SVAMITVA scheme does not issue property card for the agricultural land. It is only for housing property in the rural areas. Third and very interesting is the scheme, is the ministry which is implementing the scheme. It is not implemented by Ministry of Rural Development. Rather, it is implemented by Ministry of Panchayati Raj. So these are some very interesting things that you need to know with respect to SVAMITVA scheme. I have highlighted all the necessary details. Lastly, please know that it is a central sector scheme. What about NAKSHA? See, I'll tell you the best way to remember the NAKSHA scheme. SVAMITVA scheme is applicable only for rural areas. So similar to the SVAMITVA scheme which is for rural areas, we have NAKSHA scheme which is only for urban areas. That is one fundamental difference. So same like SVAMITVA scheme, under the NAKSHA scheme, we are undertaking the survey of urban areas. After undertaking a survey of urban areas, we are creating a GIS based map in the urban areas. And once the map is prepared, we are issuing property card to the people in urban areas. So this is what is being done under the NAKSHA scheme. But there are some important differences as well. The most important difference is SVAMITVA scheme is implemented by Ministry of Panchayati Raj. When it comes to NAKSHA scheme, please understand NAKSHA scheme is not implemented by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Rather, NAKSHA scheme is implemented by Department of Land Resources, which functions under the Ministry of Rural Development. So this is a very important difference that you need to know between NAKSHA and SVAMITVA scheme. And ultimately, NAKSHA scheme is also a central sector scheme. So all the things which I discussed, it is there here. You can just go through that. Lastly, we have a scheme called as UL-PIN, Unique Land Parcel Identification Number. Just like how you and me have a 12-digit Aadhaar card number, the government seeks to issue a unique 14-digit ID to all the land parcels in India. So in a way, it can be called as Aadhaar for land. This scheme is, as you can see, implemented by Department of Land Resources, Ministry of Rural Development. So these are some of the important schemes. So please make a note of it. Let's take up the practice question. Consider the following statements related to NAKSHA scheme. It is 100% funded by the central government. It seeks to create map of urban areas with updated land records. It is implemented by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. No, it is implemented by Department of Land Resources, Ministry of Rural Development. So the right answer is 1 and 2. SVAMITVA scheme. The scheme seeks to provide property cards in both rural and urban areas. It is only for rural areas. It uses drone technology for mapping of property, right? It is a central sector scheme, partly right. Implemented by Ministry of Rural Development. It is not Ministry of Rural Development, it is Ministry of Panchayati Raj. So that way the answer is 2 only. Let's move to the next one, that is land leasing. Why is this topic important? 2 reasons. As you can see in the economic survey, there is a special mention of land leasing model used in Kerala. Second, in mains 2015, there was a question which required you to evaluate pros and cons of land leasing in agriculture. So, based upon this, you can get a prelims question along these lines and look at the mains question for practice. Legalization of tenancy in agricultural land has a potential to address structural problems of Indian agriculture and overall economy in general, argue. So what we'll do, we'll understand what is land leasing, how it will benefit the stakeholders, what is the present status of land leasing, and what more has to be done. Let's get into our discussion. So let's say there's a farmer A. This farmer A is a small and marginal farmer. Remember we discussed what are the problems faced by small and marginal farmer: lack of access to inputs, lower productivity, and lower prices. These are the problems faced by a farmer. And let's say there is another farmer B. This farmer B is a landless farmer and or let's say small and marginal farmer. What happens in land leasing is this farmer will lease out his agricultural land with a written contract to farmer B. When the leasing takes place, the written contract will provide for how long the land is leased. That is the duration of the land leasing. It also provides as to how much rent the tenant farmer has to pay to the landowner. So there's a written contract. This kind of land leasing, it is being said, has a potential to address multifaceted problems faced by Indian agriculture as well as economy. What kind of problems can it solve? Let's understand here. Seeing from the perspective of farmer A can lease out the agricultural land. And by leasing out the agricultural land, the farmer A can migrate to urban areas, and in urban areas he can get better employment opportunities in, let's say, manufacturing or services. Not just that, farmer A can also earn rent on the agriculture land. As far as farmer B is concerned, farmer B, let's say farmer B is a landless farmer. If he's a landless farmer, at least he will have access to land to cultivate crops. Second, farmer B has a written contract which provides for tenancy. Now, in the contract, it is mentioned for how long he can cultivate crops on that land which he has leased. Written contract also provides for how much rent he has to pay. Because everything is in writing, there is less scope for exploitation of the tenant farmer. Further, because the tenant farmer has a written contract, using that written contract, he can actually go to bank and he can take loans from the bank. With that loan, he can make investment in the agricultural field. As far as economy is concerned or agriculture is concerned, there are multifaceted benefits. See, one of the biggest problem that we are facing in agriculture is the problem of disguised unemployment. Like I said, agriculture sector contributes 18% to GDP, but it employs 46% of India's workforce. So more number of people are dependent on agriculture as more than what is required. So by facilitating the land leasing, people can simply lease out agricultural land and move to some other sector. Second, the second biggest structural problem that we're facing in agriculture is fragmented land holding. Like I said, 86% of the farmers are small and marginal farmers owning 48% of agricultural land. How will tenancy solve the problem of fragmented land holding? Let's consider an example. Let's say there are two farmers, both are small and marginal farmers, and their land holdings are adjacent to one another. In that particular case, let's say this farmer owns 1 acre, this farmer also owns 1 acre, and their land is adjacent to one another. Because we are facilitating land leasing, this farmer can lease out agriculture land to this farmer. By leasing out the agriculture land, what will happen is this farmer who was cultivating just 1 acre, now he will cultivate 2 acres. So we might be able to promote consolidation of land holdings, right? So by doing so, we are able to solve one of the biggest problem in agriculture, which is fragmented land holding. It will promote occupational mobility. That is, people can shift from agriculture sector to other occupations like manufacturing and services. Last and most important, because the leasing is formal, because there's a written contract, the tenant farmer has a stability of tenure, which means he knows for how long he will cultivate crops on that leased land. That guarantee will incentivize, encourage the tenant farmer to make more investment on the agriculture land. By doing so, the overall productivity and efficiency of agriculture land will obviously improve. So that is why it is being said leasing of agriculture land is like a magic bullet to solve multifaceted problems that we are actually facing. So let's see what is the present status of land leasing. Okay. See, leasing of agriculture land has been an integral part of land reforms since 1947. So, as you know, land reforms focus on abolition of zamindari system. It focuses on land ceiling act. Apart from these two, land reforms also focus on tenancy reforms. But you must understand, land is a subject which is placed under the state list. So different states have adopted different models for leasing of agricultural land. According to a study carried out by Niti Aayog, only few states in India have liberal tenancy laws. And these states include Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, and so on. Only few states have adopted liberal tenancy laws. Most of the states have adopted very, very restrictive tenancy laws. What do you mean by restrictive tenancy laws? In most of the states, there are restrictions with respect to who can lease out the agricultural land, restriction on who can lease in the agricultural land, restriction on for how long agricultural land can be leased. Example being, in some states, there are restrictions which say that only those people who are unable to practice agriculture can lease out agricultural land. These people might include the disabled, widows, people working in defense forces. Only they can lease out agricultural land and not everyone. In some states, it is mentioned that only those people who are involved in agriculture, only those people can lease in the agricultural land. So because of that kind of restrictions that we have imposed on tenancies, it is being said that just 10% of agricultural land is under formal tenancy. Formal tenancy means written contract. Most of the tenancy is informal in India. Why? Because we have put so many restrictions. But the question here is, if leasing of agricultural land is so good, why are states not liberalizing the tenancy laws? Why have states put so much of restrictions on tenancy? See, the reason is ideological. It is being said some states believe that if they have liberal tenancy laws, which will enable people to simply lease out agricultural land, then it could lead to a feudalistic society. A society where there will be a class division between land owning class and landless class. How so? So, some states believe that if they liberalize tenancy in agricultural land, rich people will purchase agricultural land not because they would want to cultivate agricultural crops. They will purchase agriculture land to simply lease out agriculture land to landless people and earn rent on that. So don't you think that there will be two class of people in the Indian society? One is land owning class and the other one is landless class. There will be more disparities in terms of access to property, disparity between rich and poor. So that is one of the reasons as to why states have adopted restrictive tenancy laws. So there are some compelling arguments in favor of legalizing tenancy, and there are equally compelling arguments as to why we should not have liberal tenancy laws. So let's see what does Niti Aayog, the government's think tank, say with respect to tenancy in agricultural land. Niti Aayog makes a very beautiful statement. Niti Aayog says that liberalization of tenancy or liberal tenancy laws should not be seen as a symbol of feudalism. Rather, it should be seen as an economic necessity. This is what our economy demands, no? So this is what we should see. We should liberalize tenancy laws because of the economic benefits that we can reap by having liberal tenancy. Accordingly, what Niti Aayog has done, it has come up with Model Land Leasing Act. Because land is a subject placed under the state list, Parliament, that is center, cannot make a law on land leasing. So Niti Aayog has come up with a Model Land Leasing Act. And this Model Act has been circulated among all the states. And states are being encouraged, incentivized to adopt the provisions of the Model Land Leasing Act. Second, Niti Aayog has put forward a proposal to set up a land bank at a village level. What is this land bank? Let's say I'm a normal commercial bank. As a normal commercial bank, what will I do? I will accept deposits from the people, and same deposit I will give out in the form of loans to the borrowers. In a way, as a commercial bank, I'm acting like a intermediary between the people who want to save money and the people who want to borrow money. The concept of land bank is as simple as a commercial bank. So, if I'm a land bank, I will act as an intermediary between the people who would want to lease out the agricultural land and the people who would want to lease in the agricultural land. So if someone wants to lease out agricultural land, they would reach out to me. They would submit their necessary documents, property documents with me. Then on the behalf of the land owner, I as a land bank will lease out the agricultural land to a tenant farmer. So I will be acting as an intermediary between a land owner and a tenant farmer. In fact, Niti Aayog has gone one step ahead and suggested that the land bank should be directly controlled by Gram Panchayat at a village level. Now let's look at what is Kerala's land leasing model, which Economic Survey has made a special mention of. Kerala is quite famous for SHGs, self-help groups, right? So what is happening in Kerala? The women-based SHGs, they are leasing out agricultural land from the landowners for long term. Long term means, let's say, 3 to 5 years. When they lease in the agricultural land for 3 to 5 years, the women-based SHGs, they are growing horticultural crops. Horticultural crops, you know that the gestation period is quite longer, like it will take at least 2 to 3 years. So they are leasing in agricultural land for 3 to 5 years and then cultivating horticultural crops. And this leasing of agricultural land in Kerala is actually taking place through Gram Panchayat. So in a way, the Gram Panchayat is acting like a land bank in Kerala. So think of it. On one hand, it is empowering SHGs, self-help groups. Second, it is empowering Gram Panchayats. And third, it is leading to increase in the agricultural productivity in Kerala. So I would say it's a classical case where SHGs, Panchayati Raj institutions and agriculture have come together for the rural prosperity, right? So this is one of the best case studies that you can quote in the mains exam with respect to what should be done way ahead. Now let's take up the mains practice question. The legalization of tenancy in agricultural land has a potential to address the structural problems of agriculture and overall economy in general. Argue. This question requires you to argue in favor of why we should adopt liberal tenancy laws and how adoption of liberal tenancy laws will solve the structural problem of agriculture and economy. As far as introduction is concerned, you could give a basic background about land leasing. You could probably mention that land leasing is an integral part of land reforms, and it focuses on leasing of agricultural land to promote stability of to provide stability of tenure and to prevent exploitation of tenant farmers. That is how we can start your introduction here. When it comes to the body of the answer, in the body of the answer, you can mention the present status of tenancy reforms. What is the present status that we discussed? So you could mention here that only few states have adopted liberal tenancy laws, and in most of the states, the tenancy laws are quite restrictive in nature. And you could also mention why it is restrictive. In the second part of the body of the answer, you could mention why tenancy should be legalized or why we should have liberal tenancy laws. Finally, when you come to the conclusion, you could end your conclusion with Niti Ayog's recommendation, wherein you can actually say that leasing of agricultural land should not be seen as symbol of feudalism, rather it should be seen as an economic necessity. So that is how you could end your answer. As far as value addition to the answer is concerned, that is how you can convert an average answer into an excellent answer. For value addition, remember, you could incorporate a diagram which I had made showing how different stakeholders are getting benefited. You could mention the case study of land leasing from the state of Kerala here, and also mention about the extent of informal tenancy. Like I did mention that just 10% of agricultural land is under formal tenancy, right? Look at the practice question. Tenancy in agricultural land has been banned in all the states as part of land reforms. It is not banned, right? The Model Agriculture Land Leasing Act 2016 aims at legalizing tenancy in agricultural land. So far it is right, with an inbuilt provision for transfer of land to the tenants after few years. There is no inbuilt provision where tenant farmers will get the ownership of the land under the Model Land Leasing Act, which is actually incorrect. So the right answer in this case would be neither one nor two. Now coming to the area under irrigation, let's understand what are the latest developments with respect to area under irrigation. For that, there are two concepts, that is net irrigated area and gross irrigated area. Let's consider same example that I had discussed. Let's say I'm a farmer and I own 4 acres of agricultural land, and entire 4 acres of agricultural land is irrigated. And it might so happen that out of these 4 acres, 2 acres of agricultural land is irrigated more than once in a year. That is the setup. Let's say 2 acres is irrigated more than once. So we have a concept of net irrigated area. Net irrigated area basically tells us how much area is under irrigation. How much area is under irrigation? Total 4 acres. Gross irrigated area is calculated as net irrigated area plus area which is irrigated more than once in a year. You can see 4 plus 2, the gross irrigated area here will become equal to 6. The concept is almost similar to net sown area and gross cropped area. The only difference being, in net sown area and gross cropped area, we're looking at the crops which are sown. Whereas in net irrigated area and gross irrigated area, we're looking at the irrigation. That's the only difference. Otherwise, everything else is same. So based upon this concept, we can calculate a concept which is irrigation intensity, which is gross irrigated area divided by net irrigated area. That is irrigation intensity. What we discussed earlier was cropping intensity. Cropping intensity is gross cropped area divided by net sown area. That is the difference. So when you see the net irrigated area for India, it is right now 78 million hectares. So if you see our net sown area, it is 141 million hectare. So that way we can say 55% of our net sown area is under irrigation. That is the first thing. Gross irrigated area, if you see, it is somewhere around 120 million hectare. If you see our gross cropped area, it is somewhere around 220 million hectares. So once again, our gross irrigated area is somewhere around 55% of our gross cropped area. So you can just calculate our irrigation intensity. 120 million hectare divided by the 78 million hectare, you will get it somewhere as 150%. That is our irrigation intensity. This is the present status. What you should know, both net irrigated area and gross irrigated area have increased in the last decade. In fact, in last 5 to 6 years, the net irrigated area has increased from 48% to 55%. So think of it, net sown area is stagnant. Gross cropped area has increased. Net irrigated area has increased. Gross irrigated area has also increased. Only one thing has remained constant, that is net sown area. So that is what you should know here. I have incorporated all the details that I have covered. Look at this, sources of irrigation. To irrigate agricultural crops, we use different sources, which include wells, tube wells, canals, tanks, and other sources. In other sources, we can include ponds, lakes, lift irrigation. Lift irrigation means we are lifting water directly from rivers. That is the kind of lift irrigation. So, out of the different sources, as you can see, it is the two wells and wells which contribute almost 64% to irrigation in India. In fact, between two wells and wells, the share of two well is way higher than wells. So, groundwater account for major chunk of the source of irrigation in India, almost 64%, you could say. As far as area under micro irrigation is concerned, only 14 million hectare is under micro irrigation. Our net sown area is 141 million hectare. 14 million hectare is under micro irrigation, which means hardly 10% of our net sown area is under micro irrigation. This is an important fact that you should know. So you can just see here, practice MCQ number 7. Which among the following accounts for the largest source of irrigation in India? Like I said, wells and two wells. But major chunk is actually two wells. If the irrigation intensity is more than 100%, what does it necessarily denote? Irrigation intensity is calculated as gross irrigated area divided by net irrigated area. If irrigation intensity is more than 100%, it means gross irrigated area is more than net irrigated area. And why would the gross irrigated area will be more than net irrigated area? Because area which is irrigated more than once has increased, right? So the right answer is C. Same land is irrigated more than once in a year. Now coming to the agricultural credit. It is important because as you can see in prelims 2020, there was a question which required you to identify which of the following are short-term credit under the Kisan credit card scheme. So let's understand what is the present status of agricultural credit in India. According to economic survey, the total agricultural credit has increased to 25 lakh crores. Farmers can take loans either for short term or they can take loans for long term. The share of short term loans is more than the long term loans. You can just see here. share of short-term loans is more than the long-term loans. Apart from that, farmers can take loan from institutional sources and non-institutional sources. Institutional sources will include banks, NBFCs, microfinance institutions, and so on. Non-institutional sources will include money lenders. Until 1970s, the share of non-institutional credit was higher than institutional credit. But then 1969 we nationalized 14 banks, 1975 we set up RRBs, 1980 we nationalized 6 more banks. So because of these initiatives taken by the government, since 1970s, the share of non-institutional credit has reduced and the share of institutional credit has increased. Presently, 75% of the loans are availed from institutional sources and remaining 25% are availed from non-institutional sources. You can just look at this particular practice question. You can answer this particular question on your own. I have already explained it. Let me know the answer in the comment section below. Let's look into the next part, that is the recent changes in the priority sector lending, which was done on June 2024. Why is it important? Because you can see in prelims 2013 there was a question wherein the question was PSL lending by the banks constitutes lending to. The answer is all of the above. So let's first understand the basics related to priority sector lending. RBI has identified some sectors as priority sectors. These sectors include agriculture, micro, small and medium enterprises, education, housing, renewable energy, startups, social infrastructure, loans to poor and vulnerable sections. These are the sectors which have been categorized as priority sectors. Banks are required to give at least 40% of their loans to the priority sectors. But for regional rural banks, for small finance banks, the target is not 40%, rather it is 75%. Apart from that, you can look at that particular heading related to urban cooperative banks. For urban cooperative banks, the target is 75% by the end of 31st March 2026. So, right now you can say that for all the banks it is 40%, but for small finance banks, for RRB 75%, and for urban cooperative banks it is going to be 75% from 31st March 2026 by 31st March 2026. Out of this 40% which is given to all the priority sectors, 18% is a sub target with respect to loans to the agriculture sector. 18% should be given to agriculture sector, and within that 18%, compulsorily 10% should be given in the form of loans to small and marginal farmers. So please look at the breakup. Total PSL target is 40, agriculture 18, within agriculture small and marginal farmers 10. That is the target. Apart from that, you may get a question something similar to this, which is which among the following constitutes priority sector loans under agriculture? This is quite interesting, right? So what is quite important here is if loans are given to agricultural startups, if loans are given to agricultural cooperatives, even such loans are counted as priority sector loans under the agriculture only. That is what I have mentioned. Loans to startups and food processing industries, apart from cooperatives, that is food processing industries, it is counted as priority sector loans. Further, you can see all other categories which are eligible which are eligible to be considered as priority sector loans. So based upon that, the right answer in this case is 1, 2, and 3. What is this incentive-disincentive framework to push the banks to increase the flow of priority sector credit? Let's understand this to an example. See, banks generally would be more interested to give loans in the areas which are already well developed, and they would not be very much interested to give loans, that is priority sector loans, in the underdeveloped areas. Why so? If the banks give loans in already developed areas, that is PSL loans, in already developed areas, people's income level is more. They have more capacity to repay loans. There's less risk for the banks. On the other hand, if banks give more amount of loans in the underdeveloped areas, people have less income level. People's capacity to repay loans is less. There's more risk in giving priority sector loans in underdeveloped areas. So banks generally prefer to give more loans in developed areas as compared to underdeveloped areas. I would say it is good for the banks, but bad for the economy, right? Because if banks continue to give loans more in developed areas as compared to underdeveloped areas, there will be more gap between developed and underdeveloped areas, right? So, how do you discourage banks from giving loans in developed areas and encourage them to give more loans in underdeveloped areas? That is where this incentive disincentive framework comes into play. How does it work? Let's consider an example. Let's say I'm a bank, and in a year I've given 1,000 rupees loans. Priority sector target form is 40%, right? 40% of 1,000. I'm supposed to give totally 400 rupees loans to the priority sector, right? What RBI says is, if I give loans in the underdeveloped areas, RBI has come up with a criteria for what is developed and underdeveloped. Don't worry, I'll show it to you later. So if I give loans in the underdeveloped areas, let's say I give 100 rupee loan. Even though I'm giving only 100 rupee loan, RBI says I can fix a weightage of 125% to the loan amount. Loan amount is 100. Weightage is 125. 125 of 125% of 100, how much will it be? 125. So I can count 100 rupee loan which I'm giving in the underdeveloped areas as 125 in my priority sector target. What is my priority sector target? 400 rupees. So while submitting accounts to the RBI, I can say, though I have given 100 rupees loan in the underdeveloped area, I'm counting it as 125 because you have asked me to count this. On the other hand, if I give 100 rupee loan in the developed areas, in developed areas, RBI says the weightage is 90%. 90% of rupees 100, how much will I count this as PSL loan? Just 90. So in this way, I as a bank, I am incentivized to give more loans in the underdeveloped areas, and I'm disincentivized to give less loans in the developed areas. That is what is incentive disincentive framework. So this is a very interesting case, interesting a concept which has been introduced by the RBI. We can see here incentive disincentive framework, and I told you how has the RBI categorized underdeveloped and developed districts, that is based upon the per capita priority sector lending. So in the districts which have low PSL, that is if per capita priority sector lending is less than 90,000, PSL loans will carry a weightage of 125%. District which has high PSL, that is per capita priority sector lending is more than 40,000, PSL loans will carry a weightage of 90%. So please have a look at this question. There is a separate sub-target for priority sector lending for small and marginal farmers, tenant farmers and sharecroppers. separate target exists only for small and marginal farmers. There's no separate sub target for tenant farmers and sharecroppers. That is why it is incorrect. The RBI has introduced incentive-disincentive framework to ensure more credit to agriculture sector as compared to other priority sectors. Is it the case? It's not with respect to other priority sectors. No. Here we are trying to ensure that more credit goes to underdeveloped areas and less credit goes to developed areas. It is not with respect to agriculture versus other priority sectors. So some of you might be tempted to choose this as the right answer, but it is actually wrong. So answer is neither one nor two. Apart from that, let's look at Kisan credit card, because a question was already asked in prelims 2020. As the name suggests, Kisan credit card, it's basically a credit card that is issued to the farmers. And using this credit card, the farmers can avail both short-term crop loans and long-term investment loans. So both kind of loans they can avail. That's the first thing. Second thing is Kisan credit card is not just applicable to cultivators. Apart from cultivators, Kisan credit card is also applicable to tenant farmers, sharecroppers, and in fact, those people who are involved in fisheries and animal husbandry. Now, even those people are also eligible to get Kisan credit card since 2018-19. Under Kisan credit card, there is a scheme, which is a quite interesting scheme, modified interest subvention scheme. What is this modified interest subvention scheme? Let's say I'm a farmer and I'm availing short-term loans of up to rupees 3 lakhs. The rate of interest is 8.5%. Bank will charge 8.5%, but out of this 8.5%, I as a farmer, I am required to pay only 7% interest. Government will pay remaining 1.5% interest. So this 1.5% interest which is paid by the government, we can call this as subvention. In simple words, you can consider this as a subsidy that a farmer would get on interest on the loans. But understand, it is only on short-term loans of up to how much? Rupees 3 lakh. Apart from that, there is another concept of prompt repayment initiative. What is this prompt repayment initiative scheme? Let's say the farmer here, that is me, I repay the loans on time. If I repay loans on time, in that particular case, I will get one additional incentive. Look at the name, prompt interest incentive, right? Prompt repayment of interest. So what is that additional incentive? Out of this 7%, I as a farmer will have to pay only 4%. The government will pay remaining 3%. So out of this 8.5% interest, let's say I'm a farmer who repays the loans on time. Out of this 8.5, the burden on me just 4%. Remaining 4.5% interest is paid by the government, right? That is what is the modified interest subvention scheme. But this interest subvention scheme is applicable only for short-term loans. It is not applicable for long-term loans. And second, the loan that I'm availing should be up to only rupees 3 lakh. If it is more than 3 lakh, there is no interest subvention. Now, in the budget, the loan limit for interest subvention has been increased from rupees 3 lakh to rupees 5 lakh. That is one of the biggest budget announcement as far as agricultural credit is concerned. You can see the loan limit under the modified interest subvention scheme would be enhanced from rupees 3 lakh to 5 lakh for the loans taken through Kisan credit card. Practice MCQ number 12. Kisan credit card provides for only short-term crop loans to the farmer, which is incorrect. Farmers involved in fisheries and animal husbandry are eligible to receive benefits, right? All the loans under KCC enjoy the benefit of interest rate subvention. It is not applicable to all the loans. It is applicable only to short-term crop loans and only for loan of up to rupees 3 lakh, which now has been increased to up to 5 lakh. So answer in this case is 2 only. Now coming to the next topic of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. See, as far as this topic is concerned, I have covered this topic in one of the recent current affairs video. So in this current affairs video, I have discussed the salient features of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana and the important changes which have been introduced in this particular scheme. Further, I have also taken up some practice questions for discussion. So I will share the link to this particular topic of Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana in the description box. Please go through that particular video. Let's move to the next set of theme from agriculture, which is with respect to the important trends in agriculture. Like I said in the previous year prelims, questions are generally asked with respect to trends in import and export of agricultural commodities, trends in terms of production and cultivation of different agricultural commodities. Like there was a question with respect to kharif crop, with respect to pulses production, with respect to the tea producing states, and so on. You can also see this question asked in 2017, which was a question with respect to trends in the contribution of agriculture sector to GDP. So what I have done, I have gone through the latest reports of the government. From the latest reports of the government, I have prepared the trends in different crops which are cultivated in India, wherein I have compiled information with respect to trends in terms of area under crops, production of crops, what is India's ranking at a global level, and within India, which particular state is the largest producer. All those important trends I have compiled it in the form of a table. You can consider this table to be an updated one as far as the year 2025 is concerned. For example, recently the Ministry of Agriculture has come up with the advanced estimates for the financial year 24-25. So with respect to the advanced estimates only, I have prepared this particular trend. So some of you who have a table for the last year, you might find a little difference with respect to that table and this table. The reason is very simple. The reason is this particular table incorporates the latest trends from the advanced estimates of the year 24-25. That's the first thing. Second thing, what I have observed in UPSC prelims is generally with respect to area under crops, UPSC may not ask the percentage area under crops. Rather, UPSC, if you see the previous year questions, it has been asking with respect to absolute area under crops, whether absolute area under crops has increased or decreased. So that is why I made changes in my PPT with respect to area in the last decade in absolute value. Some of you who have my table for the last year, there I have incorporated the data in terms of percentage of area under different crops. Now I have updated it as per the absolute value in terms of area of the crops. So this is the latest trend. Now, for example, with respect to rice, let's focus on rice. Last year, it was Telangana which was the largest producer of rice. But as per the latest advanced estimates, of the Ministry of Agriculture. Now UP has overtaken Telangana as the largest producer of rice. Further, what I have also observed is UPSC has a tendency to focus more on the crops whose area under cultivation may have got reduced. Take for example Niger seed. Its area under cultivation as well as production had reduced. That is why UPSC asked a question on Niger. So in this particular table, I have identified some important crops which might be in news because of the production or with respect to cultivation. So that I have highlighted in the green color. For example, you can see with respect to jawar, the area in the last decade has reduced. Same can be said about bajra, about millets. As far as makhana is concerned, with respect to makhana, this becomes important because, as you know, in this year's budget, the finance minister has announced to set up a Makhana Board. So that Makhana also becomes important. That I will be covering it in the later part of the discussion. Apart from these trends, you can see the trends with respect to groundnut, mustard, soybean, sunflower, Niger, oil seeds, and so on. So in what way questions can be asked? You can just see here. You can see that practice question number 17, which is with respect to sunflower. Practice MCQ number 18, that is with respect to cotton cultivation. Practice MCQ number 19, which is with respect to cultivation of oil seeds in India. So you can just go through the trends which I have given in the table. Based upon the trends, I think you should be able to easily answer the question. Please answer the question and let me know the answer in the comment section. In case if your answer is incorrect, I will correct you. Please do not have to worry about it. But now let's look at one of the biggest announcement in the budget, which is with respect to setting up of Makhana Board. If you see Makhana, right? Makhana is also called as foxnut, or it is also referred to as black diamond. Makhana is a kind of aquatic plant which is grown in stagnant water bodies like ponds, lakes, and so on. India is the largest producer of makhana at a global level. In fact, the state of Bihar contributes almost 80 to 85% of the global production of makhana. But the problem in Bihar is whatever makhana which it is producing, all of that makhana it is supplying to other states, and other states are doing value addition to makhana. Like you must have come across a lot of flavored makhanas in the market, right? Most of the value addition with respect to makhana is done in other states. So in a way, it is not benefiting the state of Bihar. So to improve the entire supply chain of makhana with respect to, let's say, developing high yielding variety of seeds of makhana, or with respect to providing value addition in terms of makhana, improving the agricultural practices, for all of that, the government has decided to set up the Makhana Board. And because makhana, which is foxnut, is in news, all these things related to makhana becomes important. I have incorporated here. Another recent development which has happened in 2022, as you can see, Mithila makhana has been given the GI tag, geographical indication tag has been given in the year 2022. So these are some details that you need to know. How question can be asked? You can see this practice MCQ number 20. With respect to cultivation of makhana in India, consider the following statements. It is one of the minor millets that grows in stagnant water bodies like ponds and lakes. Makhana indeed grows in stagnant water bodies and lakes, but it is not a minor millet. It is actually a aquatic plant. So the first statement is incorrect. India is the largest producer of makhana in the world. Yes, second statement is right. And the third statement is, it is cultivated only in the state of Bihar. As you can see, Makhana is cultivated in the state of Bihar, some parts of Assam, Manipur, West Bengal, Tripura, and Odisha. So it is not just cultivated in the state of Bihar. That is why it is incorrect. So the right answer in this case would be 2 only. That's the right answer. Let's move to the next part. The next part is with respect to mission for Aatmanirbharta in pulses. Now this becomes important basically because in prelims 2020 there was a question with respect to trends in the cultivation and production of pulses. Second, you can see in the year 2023 we celebrated the year 2023 as International Year of Millets. Accordingly, in mains 2024 there was a question with respect to millets. Same way, this time pulses are in news. So because pulses are in news, you may get a question related to pulses. So you may get a question related to trends in pulses production. And look at the mains practice question. India needs to become self-sufficient in pulses to ensure multifaceted benefits, argue. Also discuss the strategies needed to ensure Aatmanirbharta in production of pulses. So let's briefly discuss the topic of pulses in detail. Right now in India, we grow 9 different pulses. 9 different types of pulses are grown in India. As you can see, it is pigeon pea, tur or arhar, black gram, green gram, cowpea, horse gram, chickpea. All of these are the pulses which are grown in India. With respect to production of pulses, India ranks first at a global level. In fact, India contributes 25% of the global production of pulses. Madhya Pradesh is the largest producer of pulses in India. And among the different pulses that we grow, gram or chickpea, that is chana dal, account for the largest share. Almost 33% is actually chana dal. And India ranks first in terms of area under pulses, and the overall area under pulses has seen a increase. So what you should know, India ranks first both in terms of production as well as area under pulses. In spite of that, India faces a problem with respect to pulses. The problem is that of demand supply mismatch. It is being said that almost 15% of our pulses requirements we are importing from other countries. So in fact, as I discussed in the external sector, the import of pulses have increased to 7-year high last year. So the import dependency in pulses has drastically increased. Apart from that, another important thing that you should know with respect to pulses, in fact quite important also from prelims, is if you see per capita availability of all the food grains since 1947, that is since we gained independence, per capita availability of all the food grains has increased. Unfortunately, as far as pulses are concerned, the per capita availability of pulses has actually got reduced since 1947. So you can see that the population in India has increased far higher as compared to production of pulses. That is why you can see that large scale mismatch in demand and supply. So that is the problem here. And among the different pulses, masoor dal account for the largest share of imports, followed by matar. What are the initiatives of the government to encourage production of pulses? One of the biggest initiative is PM-ASHA. Under PM-ASHA, the government is undertaking physical procurement of pulses, for which we declare MSP. So we have been declaring MSP for the pulses, and after declaring MSP, we are undertaking procurement of pulses under PM Asha. That's a first major initiative of the government. Secondly, over a period of time, the government has increased the minimum support price for pulses, basically to encourage the farmers to grow more pulses. That's the second initiative. Third is government has launched a scheme called as National Food Security Mission Pulses, under which the idea is to increase the production of pulses by additional 2 million tons. That is one of the initiative of the 3 million tons. Then there is a scheme of the government called as Price Stabilization Fund. Price Stabilization Fund has been introduced to check volatility in onion, potato and pulses. In fact, last year 2023 we have introduced rice and wheat also as part of Price Stabilization Fund. So under the Price Stabilization Fund, we are procuring pulses, maintaining buffer stock of pulses, so that whenever the pulses prices increase in the domestic market, we liquidate the buffer stock, increase the supply of pulses and bring down their prices. That is Price Stabilization Fund. But the question is, why should we increase the production of pulses? What is the benefit of increasing the production of pulses? It is being said that increasing the production of pulses would have multifaceted benefits. The benefits can be seen in terms of environmental benefits. It can be seen in terms of economic benefits as well as nutritional benefits. Let's talk about nutritional benefits. With respect to nutritional benefits, right now in India, we are facing a classical problem of protein-based inflation. What is this protein-based inflation? See, on one hand, the demand for protein-based foods in India has increased. Why? Because people's income level have increased, so people are demanding for more protein-based foods. But when you look at the production basket of agriculture, that is what we are actually producing, the production basket of agriculture is mostly dominated by rice and wheat. So supply is dominated by rice and wheat, but the demand has increased for protein-based food. And pulses, as you know, they are rich in protein. So it is creating a classical problem of protein-based inflation. And that is one of the reasons as to why we are having the problem of nutritional insecurity. So by producing more amount of pulses, we can solve the problem of hidden hunger and malnutrition, leading to nutritional security. That is why we should grow more pulses. Second is environmental benefits. You must have studied that pulses help in nitrogen fixation. And by doing nitrogen fixation, the pulses can improve the fertility of the soil. Not just that, it is being said that as compared to other crops like rice and sugarcane, pulses actually require less amount of water. So because we are facing climate change where availability of water could become more difficult, that way, pulses can help us to a certain extent mitigate the impact of climate change. So that is the environmental benefit. When it comes to economic benefit, I think economic benefit here is number one, we will be able to reduce our import bill. The reason is almost 15% of the pulses that is domestically consumed, we are importing from other countries. So our import bill will reduce. Second, think of it, if farmers grow more pulses, because the pulses are in more demand, the farmers are likely to get more prices on selling of pulses. So the income of the farmers might also increase. Third, and I would say the most important benefit of pulses is it is being said that almost more than half of the pulses in India are actually grown in rain-fed areas. So if you see, the income of the farmers in rain-fed areas is at least 3 times lower as compared to income of the farmers in irrigated areas. So if you increase the production of pulses, the farmers in rain-fed areas are likely to get more prices, right? So this is a kind of economic benefit. So these are some of the compelling arguments which you can provide for with respect to why India should grow more pulses. With respect to what strategies we must adopt. See, the best way is with respect to strategies, I would say always remember Dalwai panel, that is Committee on Doubling Farmers' Income. The strategy should be number one, reducing the input cost. Second, enhancing the productivity. Third, ensuring that the farmers get the right price for pulses. Coming to the first one, how do you reduce the input cost? With respect to inputs, we can say that farmers who are growing pulses, these farmers can be organized into farmer producer organizations, right? So we did cover about farmer producer companies, right? So we can identify the clusters where pulses are predominantly grown in India, production clusters. And in those clusters, we have to organize the farmers to form farmer producer companies based upon pulses. So if farmers are organized into farmer producer companies, they'll have access to inputs like seeds, fertilizers, credit, and so on. Apart from that, since pulses are predominantly grown in rain-fed areas, we must encourage farmers to focus on micro irrigation, to focus on rainwater harvesting, so that more pulses can be grown, right? So we can write some points in favor of, let's say, inputs, that is organizing farmers into FPOs, micro irrigation, and credit. In fact, there is one farmer producer company in Tamil Nadu called as Seeds. This particular company has become quite famous in India for the production of pulses. You can give this as an example of a case study. Second one is enhancing productivity. How do you increase the yield of pulses? We have to obviously introduce high yielding variety of seeds of pulses. So more research and development has to be undertaken so that we develop new high yielding variety of seeds. That is one thing. And we have to give incentives to the farmers to undertake crop diversification. For example, earlier the Haryana government had launched a scheme. Under the scheme, Haryana government was providing for cash transfer to the farmers to give up cultivation of rice and wheat and instead shift to cultivation of pulses. So such kind of scheme can be replicated at a national level. As far as ensuring the right prices for the farmers when they sell the pulses, you could see number one, we have to control volatility in the prices of pulses by building adequate buffer stock. This becomes important because in terms of pulses, what we are witnessing is a classical problem of cobweb phenomena. This was a problem identified by the economic survey 2 to 3 years back. Cobweb phenomena means if you track the prices of pulses, it is like a sine wave. So 1 year prices of pulses increase, immediately next year they drop, and next year they further increase. Imagine we all are farmers who are growing pulses. If there is volatility in the price of pulses, it makes us unsure, right? Whether we'll get the good price when we cultivate and sell pulses in the market or not. So this will obviously discourage us from cultivating more pulses. So we have to ensure stability in the prices of pulses to encourage more farmers to grow pulses. And that is possible by building adequate buffer stock under price stabilization fund. More procurement of pulses has to be undertaken under PM ASHA, just like how we are doing it for rice and wheat. And to discourage the farmers from cultivating more rice and wheat, we have to adopt closed-ended procurement policy. Closed-ended procurement policy means right now, when you see procurement of rice and wheat takes place under open-ended procurement policy. Open-ended procurement policy means there is no limit on procurement of rice and wheat by Food Corporation of India. Since there is no limit on procurement of rice and wheat, farmers would invariably grow rice and wheat because they have a guaranteed buyer in the form of FCI. There is no incentive on the farmers to shift to other crops. So if you adopt close-ended procurement policy, it means FCI will put a limit on procurement of rice and wheat from the farmers. So farmers know that FCI will not procure unlimited rice and wheat. So they'll shift to other crops like pulses. We have to promote contract farming, and more importantly, we have to liberalize agriculture marketing, wherein we give necessary freedom to the farmers to sell pulses wherever and whomsoever they want to, and not necessarily to traders based in mandis. So the farmers who are growing pulses can sell the pulses directly to food processing industries. They can directly sell the pulses to exporters. By eliminating middlemen and intermediaries, we can ensure that the farmers are able to get more prices on pulses. So this is the strategy. So this year's budget has decided to launch mission for Aatmanirbharta in pulses. This particular mission has been launched after the launch of mission for Aatmanirbharta in edible oils. So we have to ensure the success of this particular mission by adopting these strategies. Based upon that, you can look at the practice question here. India needs to become self-sufficient in pulses to ensure multifaceted benefits argue. So here you have to highlight as to why we should grow pulses. That is, we discussed environmental benefits, economic benefits, right, and nutritional benefits. Discuss the strategies to ensure Atmanirbhar in production of pulses. So while discussing the strategies, you have to break down the strategies into inputs, productivity, and the prices. So the body of the answer will have two parts. One is significance and the second one is strategies. What about introduction? The introduction can actually start with the present status of pulses, which is India ranks first in the production and area under pulses. However, there is demand supply mismatch leading to huge import of pulses. That is what can be your introduction. As far as the body of the answer is concerned, part 1, why we need to become self-sufficient. Then as a connecting para to the next part, which is strategies, you can briefly touch upon the initiatives taken by the government, which is PM ASHA, increase in MSP, and price stabilization fund, that you can mention. Third part is the strategies needed. And lastly, in the conclusion, you can write long-term implications of these strategies. That is how you can write a good answer in 150 words. Now let's look at the next part related to agriculture, which is the structural transformation in the agriculture sector or the rural areas. This becomes important because in this year's budget, the finance minister has launched two initiatives for the holistic transformation of rural areas. One initiative is Pradhan Mantri Dhanya Krishi Yojana. That is one initiative. And there is another initiative for rural prosperity. So before understanding what are these initiatives, let's understand the background as to what is the need for this for these initiatives. Then you will be able to better understand as to why these initiatives have been launched. So let's understand the structural transformation which is right now undergoing in rural areas. With respect to structural transformation, you can see some benefits of structural transformation taking place in rural areas. What are these benefits? Let's understand one by one. The first good thing which is happening in rural areas is the percentage of workforce dependent on agriculture in the last decade has actually got reduced. It has got reduced from 58% to 46%. Why would I call it as a good development? The reason is very simple. It is because of the fact that we are able to reduce disguised unemployment in the agriculture sector. That is a good thing. So less people are now dependent on agriculture. Second, if you see the contribution of rural India to different sectors, it is contributing 95% to the agricultural output, which is quite understandable because rural areas are predominantly agrarian. That is quite understandable. But what is really very surprising to most of you is the contribution of rural India to manufacturing output. It has increased to 51%. This data is provided by none other than Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog has published a data with respect to contribution of urban India and rural India to manufacturing output. It says that in 2011-12, rural India contributed 51% to the manufacturing output and urban India contributed 49%. So it is wrong to actually think that rural areas are always agrarian. Rural areas are undergoing structural transformation from agriculture to manufacturing. So you might be thinking, sir, who are these people who are manufacturing in rural areas, right? Number one, MSMEs. MSMEs are considered to be the backbone of manufacturing sector, contributing 36% to manufacturing output. Majority of the MSMEs are based in rural areas. Food processing industries are based in rural areas, right? Further, if you compare the cost of land in rural areas and urban areas, can I say the cost of land in rural areas is lower as compared to urban areas? So that is the reason as to why industries are being set up in rural areas and the manufacturing, the contribution of rural areas to manufacturing output has increased to 51%. The contribution of rural India to services is 25%, one fourth. In fact, if you see the contribution of rural India to manufacturing, in 1970s, it was somewhere around 25%, and by 2011-12, it has increased to 50%. Can you see what has happened? It has doubled from 25 to 50%. Don't you think it's a good structural transformation where rural areas are shifting from agriculture to manufacturing sector? People in rural areas, they might earn income from farm and non-farm. Farm means agriculture, which is like they must be cultivating crops, they must be working as agriculture laborers. That is farm income. Non-farm income means they might be employed in non-farm sectors like manufacturing or let's say services and so on. Like you may have people who are employed as ASHA workers in rural areas, people who are working as government teachers, people who are operating their own kirana stores in rural areas, right? That is a non-farm income. It is said that 70% of the income which people are earning in rural areas is coming from non-farm and just 30% is coming from farm, which is another development which is happening in rural areas. This is just one side of the story. This is all good things. But there's completely another side of the coin, a completely a sad story of what is happening in rural areas. Number one, the income of the agricultural household is just around 6,500. It is as per 2011-12. If you see the latest, now it is almost 10,000. But I'm saying it as per 2011-12, it is 6,500. It is the income of an agricultural household. That is the monthly income. And on an average, their monthly expenditure is 6,250, which clearly shows that in rural areas, agriculture is becoming a non-viable profession. Economically, it is not viable because they are getting very less income. So I told you that dependence on agriculture sector, that is percentage of people dependent on agriculture sector, has got reduced from 58 to 45. Why it has got reduced? It has reduced not because people are getting better employment opportunities in other sector. It has got reduced because people are not earning enough income in agriculture sector. So you know that there's a push factor and pull factor. Here, there's no pull factor towards other sectors. It is mostly a push factor, push away from agriculture sector. Second, we all know the problem of Indian economy, that is jobless growth. In fact, employment elasticity of Indian economy is calculated to be somewhere at 0.1. Employment elasticity of 0.1 means if our GDP increases by 1%, employment increases by just 0.1%. That is the employment elasticity of entire Indian economy, which is obviously very less. Rural areas have a completely different story. In rural areas, you can see employment elasticity is actually negative. What do you mean by negative employment elasticity? Negative employment elasticity means the contribution to GDP is increasing. But instead of creating more jobs in rural areas, we are destructing the jobs. According to Niti Aayog report, between 2005 to 2011-12, the employment elasticity was minus 2.8. That is one of the biggest problem in rural areas. You could say that this is understandable because people are living agriculture, right? But there is a problem because I told you share of rural India to manufacturing sector has doubled. So what should have actually happened is people who are living agriculture sector, these people should have got observed in the manufacturing sector based in rural areas, right? But that is not happening. Why it is not happening? Two reasons. People who are living agriculture, they do not have the necessary skill set to get employed in the manufacturing sector. Problem number one. Problem number two, in the rural areas, the industries are supposed to be capital intensive. Sorry, supposed to be labor intensive, but rather than being labor intensive, they are being capital intensive. They are more capital. They are using more capital as compared to labor. So because they are more capital intensive, the need, the employment creation in rural areas is quite lower. And last, there's a lot of distress migration which is taking place to urban areas. So a lot of people from rural areas are migrating to urban areas, not because they have good opportunities in urban areas, but we do not have good opportunities in rural areas. So obviously, if you look at all these problems that are discussed, don't you think that we need to enhance more opportunities for people in rural areas? We have to focus on prosperity of rural areas. How will you focus on prosperity of rural areas? By addressing these problems. What problems? Number one, we have to enhance the agricultural productivity. Second, we have to create more jobs. We have to focus on enhancing skill set of the workers. We have to focus on more labor intensive industries, and more importantly, we have to check the distress migration taking place from rural to urban areas. So to address these multifaceted problems, government has launched one of the biggest initiative, which is called as Pradhan Mantri Dhanya Krishi Yojana. What is this particular scheme? Let us understand. All of you must have known about aspirational district program. In aspirational district program, we are focusing on holistic development of underdeveloped districts. To undertake development of underdeveloped districts, we are adopting a approach which is classically called as 3C approach. Under the 3C, the first C stands for collaboration, where we are focusing on collaboration between central government officers, state government officers, and district collectors. Collaboration. Second C is convergence. Central government is implementing large number of schemes for the development of backward areas. State government is also, in a way, implementing large number of schemes. We are trying to have convergence between central government and state government schemes. And lastly, we are focusing on promoting competition, that is competitive federalism, promoting competition among the districts. So we have created a dashboard. On this particular dashboard, on a real-time basis, we are tracking the performance of aspirational districts with respect to their development. This, in a way, fosters a spirit of competition among the backward districts to improve their performance. We have adopted the same philosophy in Pradhan Mantri Dhanya Krishi Yojana. What we have done, aspirational district focuses on underdeveloped districts, right? This particular scheme is focusing on 100 districts which have low agricultural productivity, moderate crop intensity, and below average credit parameters. So in such districts, we are coming up with these objectives so as to bring about holistic development of the agriculture sector. So as such, we have not allocated money or funds to this particular scheme. The reason is, what is the scheme all about? It is all about convergence between central government schemes and state government schemes. No? Money is already allocated, but what we need is the money so allocated should be used more efficiently. So that is why we are not allocated funds to this particular scheme, but whatever funds are already allocated, we are ensuring that those funds are better and more efficiently utilized. Coming to the next scheme. Next scheme is Rural Prosperity and Resilience, whose basic objective is to prevent distress migration to urban areas and provide better employment opportunities in the rural areas. That is another scheme. So these are the two most important schemes as far as agriculture and rural India is concerned. So while delivering the budget speech, the finance minister highlighted that agriculture would be the first engine of growth of the Indian economy. How do you make agriculture as the first engine of growth? By having such kind of schemes which focuses on holistic, comprehensive, and all encompassing development of rural areas. So let's move to the next announcement. Next announcement is, all of you know that one of the biggest problem that we have in Indian agriculture is the yield of agriculture crops in India is lower as compared to the global average. So to increase the yield, the per acre yield of the crops, the government has decided to launch National Mission on High Yielding Seeds. That is a new announcement. Next, with respect to cotton production. With respect to cotton production, budget has announced a proposal to encourage cultivation of extra long staple cotton. So what is this extra long staple cotton? Let's try to understand here. For that, let's first look at what is the present status of cotton production in India. As you can see, India is one of the largest producer of cotton. It is one of the largest producer of cotton, and it accounts for almost 40% of world's area under cotton. To encourage the production of cotton, the government announces MSP, minimum support price. This MSP is announced for two varieties of cotton, that is medium staple cotton and long staple cotton. Once the MSP is declared, the procurement might be done by Cotton Corporation of India. So some of you must be thinking, what is this staple? So when cotton is grown, and after it is grown, we roll cotton into cotton threads. So what is the length of that particular thread? That is a kind of staple. So you can see extra long staple cotton is a cotton whose staple length is at least 32.5 mm or more. Such kind of cotton, we call it as extra long staple cotton. It is being said that extra long staple cotton is in very high demand in the global economy. The reason being, if you produce fabrics using extra long staple cotton, the fabrics have better appearance, they are more durable, and they have less wrinkles. And extra long staple cotton do not break easily. You can easily spin them into clothes. That is one of the biggest advantage of extra long staple cotton. There are two very famous varieties of extra long staple cotton. Some of you must have heard of these two varieties, like Egyptian Giza cotton or US Supima cotton. For example, if you purchase a shirt which is made from Giza cotton, I would say this quality of shirt will be far superior as compared to a normal cotton shirt. It is more durable, it has less wrinkles, it is more long lasting, and it has far better appearance as compared to normal shirts. As far as production of extra long staple cotton in India is concerned, you can see the share of extra long staple cotton in the overall cotton production in India has reduced from 10% to just 1% in 2016-17. Out of the different varieties of cotton right now, the contribution of extra long staple cotton is just 1%, which is problematic. So most of the extra long staple cotton that we use for producing fabrics in India is imported, which obviously is leading to a problem of Aatmanirbharta in extra long staple cotton. There are two varieties of extra long staple cotton in India, which is Sown and DCH32, which are grown in states such as Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Madhya Pradesh. Accordingly, to encourage cultivation of extra long staple cotton, the government has decided to come up with some incentives. So because extra long staple cotton is in news, this becomes quite important. Let me tell you, this particular initiative was launched in the budget almost 2 to 3 years back. The finance minister has announced this particular initiative once again. So just remember about extra long staple cotton, that should be more than sufficient. Apart from that, I've also incorporated the trends in terms of milk production in India, the trends in terms of fisheries sector. So I hope you should be able to go through these important trends related to the livestock and fisheries. Let's now move to the manufacturing sector, that is the industrial sector. So we are done with agriculture now. We are moving to the next pillar, that is industrial sector. So what I have done is to discuss the important announcements in the budget as well as to discuss important recommendations made by economic survey. What I have done, I have prepared a table. In this table, I have highlighted the problems that we are facing in industrial sector or the manufacturing sector, and how those problems are sought to be addressed in the announcement made in the budget or the recommendations of economic survey. Let's understand these problems and budget announcements and economic survey recommendations one by one. The manufacturing sector in India, its share in terms of GDP and its share in terms of employment has remained stagnant since 1991. And I'll tell you one important thing. It is being said no country has become a developed country without being industrialized. So, if India want to become Viksit Bharat by 2047, India needs a sound manufacturing base. So, in order to promote manufacturing sector in India, the budget has announced that a new mission called as manufacturing mission would be launched. This manufacturing mission would try to address the multifaceted problems faced by manufacturing sector, like ease of doing business, skilled workforce, technology adoption, and develop the MSMEs, which are considered to be the backbone of manufacturing. Second, if you see India ideally should have focused on labor intensive industries, because we are a country which is rich in human resources. So we should have focused on labor intensive industries. But ironically, rather than focusing on labor intensive industries, we have focused more on capital intensive industries. Why so? There are two reasons. One is push factor and the other one is pull factor. Push factor means we were pushed away from labor intensive industries. Why? As you all know, the labor laws in India are quite complex. So if I'm an entrepreneur, I have a choice between employing more workers or adopting machines. If I employ more workers, my compliance burden will increase. So I would rather choose to use more machines as compared to labor, because my compliance burden will be reduced. So it's a kind of push factor. Pull factor means I, as an entrepreneur, is easily pulled towards capital intensive industries. The reason is, number one, government provides capital, cheaper credit to start industries, and second, government explicitly focus on capital intensive industries, especially right from second 5-year plan. You must be knowing Mahalanobis plan, which focus on heavy industrialization. We started developing heavy iron and steel industries then. So the government focus was explicitly more on capital intensive industries rather than labor intensive industry. That is why we are focused more on capital intensive industries. Repeatedly, economic surveys in the past have been making recommendations that we have to give a push towards labor intensive industries like textile and leather. These are the two industries which have a huge potential to create more number of jobs. Example, you can see Bangladesh. Bangladesh in the recent years has become one of the largest exporter of textiles, which in a way is good for Bangladesh because it is able to create large number of employment opportunities, especially for women. So in this year's budget, the finance minister has decided to launch a new focus product scheme to boost the production of footwear and leather sectors. Next, if you see our manufacturing sector, our manufacturing sector is dominated by MSMEs, where MSMEs account for 36% of our manufacturing output. The government gives large number of incentives to MSMEs. What kind of incentives? Incentives are provided in the form of priority sector lending, government procurement policy, about which we will be discussing. MSMEs are exempted from labor laws. So government gives huge incentives to MSMEs. The idea is to ensure that these MSMEs should grow into bigger giants, large scale industries. But the problem here is these incentives are given to MSMEs irrespective of their age. No matter how old MSME is, these MSMEs will continue to get benefits. The problem is if MSMEs become bigger, they will lose the status of MSME. They will no longer be considered as MSME. And if they are no longer considered as MSME, they lose out on the benefits. So what MSMEs do in order to avoid losing out on benefits, they continue to remain smaller rather than become bigger. That is one of the biggest problem that we are facing in MSME sector. So one of the economic surveys in the past had said that incentives to stay smaller are far higher than the incentives to grow bigger. This was the statement made by one of the economic survey in the past. So we should encourage the MSMEs to grow bigger. So for that, the budget this year has decided to change the definition of MSMEs, about which we will be covering in detail in the next part. The next one is, see, India has to focus on advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, Internet of Things, and so on. And to do so, we have to make substantial amount of investment on research and development. But the problem here is, if you see our investment on research and development, it has got stagnated at 0.7% in the last decade. If you compare the expenditure on research and development with other countries, in China, it is somewhere around 2.4%. In Israel, it is more than 4%. So other countries are making far more investment in research and development as compared to India. So we need to promote innovation. So for that, the budget this year has decided to allocate 20,000 crores to encourage private sector driven research and development. Remember, in the analysis of external sector, we did discuss that India's integration into global value chains is quite lower. So we have to encourage more integration to global value chain. So in this year's budget, Finance Minister has announced that necessary support will be given to industries for integration into global value chains. We also discussed in the theme of external sector that India's share in the global merchandise exports is hardly around 1.8%. An economy which boosts itself as being a fifth largest economy, it cannot have a share in the global exports at just 1.8%, right? So this has to increase. Accordingly, we have covered this, that Finance Minister has announced these measures. We covered this in the external sector. And when I started the first topic, that is on the growth and development, the first video, in the first video I've discussed that one of the biggest problem in Indian economy is over regulation. Remember, we discussed the concept of regulatory cholesterol with respect to utilization of factors of production like land, building, and labor. So this year's economic survey has given explicit focus on systematic deregulation for efficient utilization of factors of production. Lastly, so one of the other problem which has been identified by economic survey this year is It is said that there is large scale interstate disparities with respect to development of manufacturing sector. It is highlighted that manufacturing sector in India is predominantly concentrated in only few states. These states, as you can see, they are Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, and Karnataka. These four states together account for 43 percentage of the manufacturing output, whereas six northeastern states they account for just 0.7 percentage of manufacturing output, which shows huge interstate disparities with respect to development of manufacturing sector. So accordingly, the economic survey has proposed that we need to have state specific, region specific industrial policies. When I say state specific or region specific industrial policies means each and every state should identify its core strength in the industrial sector. And to promote that core strength, they have to come up with separate policy. Example being, let's say the green revolution states like Punjab and Haryana, they can focus on agro-based industries, that is food processing industries. If you think of coastal states can focus on export oriented industries because it becomes quite easier for them to export. On the other hand, the mineral rich states which are located in the central and eastern part of India, these mineral rich states can focus more on mineral industries like iron and steel industries. So we should encourage the states to identify the core strength. And once the core strength is identified, these states should be encouraged to have state specific industrial policy. Apart from that, economic survey has also highlighted that if you look at the states such as Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, and Karnataka, the reason why these states have got developed in terms of manufacturing sector is because of ease of doing business, which means in these states the regulatory cholesterol is lower as compared to other states. For example, the land acquisition in these states is less cumbersome. The labor laws are more flexible in these states. So because these states have focus on systematic deregulation, these states are able to attract more investment in terms of manufacturing. Going one step ahead, the economic survey makes a special mention of the state of Tamil Nadu. Let's see what is a special case study of Tamil Nadu here. You can see Tamil Nadu, it accounts for 38% of India's footwear output. What Tamil Nadu government has done, it has come up with a dedicated footwear and leather products policy 2022. It has set up a separate investment promotion agency. Look at the name, Guidance. As the name suggests, this investment promotion agency is focused on improving the ease of doing business. So it is able to attract foreign investors. This particular agency has been able to attract contract manufacturers for the Nike shoes company. So a lot of companies who are manufacturing shoes for Nike, they have established their business in Tamil Nadu. They have set up dedicated investment facilitator for each investor. They have developed industrial estates in rural areas so that women can easily be part of the manufacturing sector. And they have established dedicated industry academia coordination cell, which is called as work labs. Basic idea is to improve the skill set of the workers. So while writing an answer in mains, you could incorporate this as an example, that is as a case study. That is how you could write a very good answer. What I've done is basically I have tried to highlight the important initiatives of the government in the budget as well as economic survey, and I have linked it to the problems that manufacturing sector is facing. Now coming to the most important announcement in the budget, which is with respect to change in the definition of MSMEs. Why is this topic so important? See, this question asked in 2023. This question basically talks about the definition of MSMEs in the first statement, right? Which is obviously wrong. This statement is wrong. But this was a question asked in 2023. Why was this question asked? In 2020, almost 2 years before, the government had changed the definition of what exactly is a micro, small and medium enterprise. Once again, the government has revised the definition of MSME. So based upon the recent changes, you could get a question on this line. What do you mean by problem of missing middle in the manufacturing sector? Do you think recent changes introduced in the definition of MSMEs would solve the problem? Argue. Apart from that, you can have a look at the practice questions 21, 22 and 23. And you can see that question asked in mains 2023, where you were required to comment on the present policies of the government with respect to the manufacturing sector with more focus on MSMEs. So let's first have a basic understanding about the present status of MSMEs. If you see, MSMEs account for 30% of GDP, 35% of manufacturing output, and 45% of the exports from India. That is a contribution of MSMEs. That is why they are considered to be the backbone of the manufacturing sector. With respect to MSMEs, you can see how many MSMEs we have in India. Totally, we have 633 lakh MSMEs, which are in different sectors like manufacturing, electricity, trade, and other services. What becomes important is not the number, obviously. You should know that in which particular sector majority of MSMEs are functioning. Can you see here? Majority of MSMEs are actually functioning in the trade. What is trade? Trade in this case means they could be into retail trade or wholesale trade. So retail trade and wholesale trade is where majority of the MSMEs are concentrated. And in terms of area, region wise, you can very well see the 1% of MSMEs are based in rural areas and 49% are based in urban areas. So if you want to have rural prosperity, obviously MSMEs are the key. Apart from that, based upon the investment and turnover of MSMEs, they are categorized into micro, small and medium enterprises. What is that categorization? We'll see that in the next part, don't worry. So can you see here the number of micro enterprises, the number of small enterprises and number of medium enterprises? Total number of enterprises that we have in India is 633 lakh, out of which 99% of MSMEs are actually, 99% of MSMEs are actually micro MSMEs, not small. So majority of MSMEs in India are small, that is micro enterprises here. So coming to the question of what exactly do you mean by missing middle? Missing middle means if you look at our manufacturing sector, in manufacturing sector, we have large number of micro enterprises and very few large enterprises. There is near absence of medium size enterprises. So we have large number of micro enterprises and very few large enterprises. Medium enterprises are almost absent. This problem, we call it as problem of missing middle. Ideally, don't you think these micro enterprises, they should transition into medium enterprises, and medium enterprises should transition into the large enterprises? But that is not happening. Micro enterprises have continued to remain micro only. That is the problem. Why is it problem? Remember, I discussed that micro enterprises get a lot of benefits from the government. Like they are getting benefits in terms of priority sector lending, benefits in terms of government procurement. So all the central government ministries, departments, agencies, they are required to procure at least 25% of goods and services from micro and small enterprises. So that is the benefit which they are getting. They are also exempted from labor laws. So the micro enterprises think that if they become bigger, large enterprises, they will lose out on the benefits. So to avoid losing out on benefits, they'll continue to remain micro rather than grow bigger. This is the problem. You can see we are giving incentives to MSMEs in the form of exemption from labor laws, priority sector lending, public procurement policy, and so on. Ideally, by taking these incentives, the MSMEs should become giant MSMEs. Like they should optimally utilize factors of production, the productivity should be higher, they should create more jobs, and so on. But instead of growing bigger, they have continued to remain small. Such firms, we call them as draft firms. So they are employing less than 100 people, but they are more than 10 years old. So that is what we call it as problem of missing middle. So what steps has the government taken to address the problem of missing middle? First step, which is the change in the definition of MSMEs, which was introduced in the year 2020. Under the MSME Development Act, under this particular act, the government is empowered to notify as to what is a micro, small, and medium enterprises. Earlier, the definition of what is micro, small, and medium was based only on how much investment the industries have done. So, as the investment increases, micro will become small, small will become medium. That is how the definition was made. The definition included only investment, it did not include turnover. What did MSMEs do? They did not make any investment because they thought if they increase investment, they will lose out on the benefits of being a MSME. So now in 2020, the government added a new parameter, that is turnover. So we increase the investment limit also, and we included the criteria of annual turnover also. So based upon the investment and turnover, MSMEs were categorized into micro, small, and medium. What is that criteria? I don't think that is important because now we have come up with a new definition altogether, right? Earlier, based upon whether the MSME is into manufacturing or services, the criteria for investment was different. A different investment criteria for MSMEs in manufacturing, a different criteria for MSMEs in the services sector. Now, there is no different criteria. Now, there is a uniform criteria for both manufacturing based MSMEs and services based MSMEs. And lastly, government has said if MSMEs are exporting goods, services to other countries, whatever they're exporting, right, that value will not be included to count the turnover. Why so? Because we want to encourage exports by MSMEs. So whatever exports they are doing, we said, don't worry about exports. Even if you export more, anyway, we are not going to count it in your turnover. So you can continue to remain a MSME. That is a change that we introduced in 2020. After that, in 2021, government said the MSMEs which are involved in retail and wholesale trade, those MSMEs, they will be allowed to get registered on the Udyog portal. Udyog portal is basically a portal where all the MSMEs can seek registration. So until 2021, MSMEs which are into retail and wholesale, they are not allowed to get registered on the Udyog portal, but they were allowed to get registered. That's the first thing. Second, government said once they get registered on that portal, the MSMEs which are into retail and wholesale trade will also get benefits of priority sector lending, PSL. However, they will not get other benefits like exemption from labor laws, government procurement policy. That benefit they'll not get. The only benefit which they will get is priority sector lending. That was another change which was introduced in 2021. Now let's see what's the latest change in the budget. I told you that micro, small and medium enterprises, they are categorized based upon their investment and turnover. So you can see for micro it was 1 crore investment and 5 crore turnover. For small, 10 crore investment and 50 crore turnover. For medium, 50 crore investment and 250 crores turnover. Now, what has the finance minister announced is investment and turnover limit will be increased. How much? Investment limit will be increased by 2.5 times. You can see it is increased by 2.5 times, and the turnover limit will be increased by 2 times. That is a new change which has been introduced. So what are the benefits of the new changes in the definition of MSMEs? For one, obviously, because the investment and turnover limit has been increased by 2.5 and 2 times respectively, it will encourage MSMEs to grow bigger without worrying about losing out on benefits. Germany's MSMEs are quite famous at a global level, especially with respect to their technology adoption. German MSMEs are called as Mittelstand. That is a name that we give to MSMEs in Germany. In fact, according to number of economists, the phenomenal development of industrial sector in Germany is attributed to the growth of these MSMEs. So we can replicate the German model. We can promote ease of doing business because we are done away with the distinction between manufacturing and services, and promote exports because exports will not be included while calculating the turnover. But is it sufficient? According to some economists, it is obviously a step in the right direction. But what we must also do is, it is being said, even now, MSMEs will continue to get benefits, incentives, irrespective of their age. Irrespective of their age, they'll continue to get benefits, right? So what we must do, whenever we give benefits to MSMEs, the benefits should be limited to first 5 to 7 years only. Beyond 5 to 7 years, the MSMEs should no longer be able to avail the benefits. In fact, this was the recommendation made by Economic Survey of 2018-19. That is, we need to incentivize infant firms rather than draft firms. Incentives to MSMEs should be limited to initial 5 to 7 years only. So let's look at the practice questions here. Starting with practice MCQ number 21. The micro enterprises account for 99% of MSMEs in India. Majority of MSMEs are in manufacturing, they are in trade. Majority of MSMEs are based in rural areas. So answer is 19. Public procurement policy. The public procurement policy has been notified under MSME Development Act 2006. It is right. It requires every central government ministry, department or PSUs to procure 25% of goods from micro and small enterprises. Yes, it is right. Goods and services available on government e-marketplace portal must be mandatorily procured from the portal. You can consider government e-marketplace portal as a kind of Amazon for government. So any government ministry or department wants to purchase goods, they can purchase the goods from government e-marketplace portal. The government e-marketplace portal brings together seller and the buyer. The buyer in this case is government departments. So they can purchase different goods which they would want, like furniture, laptops, computers, and so on, from the different sellers. Government has stated that if there are certain goods which are listed on GEM portal, compulsorily those goods have to be procured from GEM portal only. If goods are not listed on the GEM portal, then they can procure it outside the GEM portal. But if goods are listed, compulsorily they have to purchase it from that portal only. So the third statement is also right. So answer is 1, 2, and 3. Practice MCQ number 23. The MSME Development Act 2006 seeks to ensure timely payment to MSMEs for the supply of goods and services. Okay. In this particular act, it has been mentioned that whenever any buyer purchases goods from MSMEs, they have to make payment on time. The maximum delay in payment can be just up to maximum of 45 days. So if any buyer purchases goods from MSMEs, compulsory the payment has to be made within 45 days. It further goes on to say, if there's a delay in making payment beyond 45 days, they would have to pay additional payment, additional compensation to MSMEs. It is mentioned in the act itself. Please make a note of this. So MSME Development Act seeks to ensure timely payment of MSMEs for supply of goods and services, right? MSME Development Act imposes penalty on the buyer in case of delayed payment. Yes, both the statements are right. So the right answer in this particular case is A. You can have a look at the mains question for practice. What do you mean by problem of missing middle in manufacturing? And do you think recent changes introduced in the definition of MSMEs would solve the problem? Argue. Here in the introduction, you can directly start with what is the problem of missing middle. So explain the problem of missing middle along with the facts. After you explain the problem of missing middle, in the body of the answer, you could basically incorporate the diagram highlighting the reasons and implications of problem of missing middle. Remember the diagram which I showed to you? The government gives incentives to MSMEs. What should happen and what is happening now? That diagram you could incorporate. It will provide a value addition to the answer. Second, you can write about the recent changes in the definition of in the MSMEs right from 2020s onwards. Change in definition in 2020, 2021 and the recent change. And as far as the conclusion is concerned, you can directly give the recommendations of Economic Survey 2018-19. That is, we need to incentivize infant firms rather than draft firms, where incentives to MSMEs should be limited to just 5 to 7 years only. That is what you can write in the conclusion. The next one is the credit guarantee scheme for MSMEs. What is this credit guarantee scheme? Let's understand here through the flow chart. To make your understanding easier, I have numbered the sequence here. Let's say there's a bank. This bank extends collateral free loan to MSMEs, loans without any collateral. When the banks extend a collateral free loan, bank will pay certain amount of guarantee fee to an organization called as Credit Guarantee Fund Trust for Micro and Small Enterprises. To this particular organization, it will pay some guarantee fee. In return for guarantee fee, this organization will provide guarantee on repayment of loans by MSMEs. Guarantee on repayment of loans means in case of default on repayment of loans by MSMEs, this organization will repay loan to the bank on behalf of the MSME. So this is what is credit guarantee scheme for MSMEs. What are the salient features we can see? It includes all the commercial banks, RRBs and NBFCs. How much guarantee does this particular organization provides for? Guarantee ranges from 50 to 85% of the loan amount. If MSME takes a loan of 1 crore, the organization may make a guarantee of repayment of 50 lakhs to 85 lakh. What will be the loan limit? Credit guarantees available only for loans of up to 5 crores. In the new budget, this year, first change is this loan limit has been increased or doubled from 5 crores to 10 crores. So now if MSMEs are taking collateral free loan of up to 10 crore, credit guarantee fund will provide for credit guarantee. That's the first change. The amount of guarantee fee which the bank has to pay to this organization will be reduced. And the government is going to come up with a customized credit card with a limit of 5 lakh for the micro enterprises. So this is with respect to the changes incorporated in the credit guarantee scheme for MSMEs. Now with respect to startups in India, you can see Finance Minister has decided to focus on creating a new fund of funds for the startups in the budget. Apart from that, as highlighted in money control, category 1 and category 2 alternate investment funds are going to get tax clarity in the have got the clarity with respect to tax in the recent budget. With respect to startups, remember we have already covered about the tax relief for the startups in the public finance already. Apart from that, we will understand what is actually the budget announcement and what is this clarity with respect to tax. So here you can just see government has come up with a new scheme for the first time entrepreneurs. You can just read through this, but my focus is on this new fund of funds for the startups to be established. Based upon this that we are going to cover, you could get a question like this. Practice MCQ number 24, which is with respect to alternate investment funds, or what is the difference between mutual funds and alternate investment funds. So let's quickly understand what is alternate investment fund, difference between AIF and mutual funds, and then we will focus on the budget announcement. See, all of you must have heard about the mutual funds as to how do mutual funds actually work. In case of mutual funds, what happens is mutual funds pulls in money from the investors. It takes money from the investors. After taking money from the investors, they will invest in financial instruments like shares, bonds, and so on. That is what a mutual fund company basically does. So mutual fund is a kind of pooled investment vehicle. Same way, you could consider alternate investment fund also as pooled investment vehicle, because just like mutual fund, it will pull in money from the investors. But one fundamental difference between mutual funds and alternate investment fund is that in mutual fund, you could make an investment of as low as, let's say, rupees 500 per month. You must have heard about SIP, right? You could start with an SIP of, let's say, rupees 500. But when it comes to alternate investment fund, the minimum investment that you can make in AIF is actually much higher at 1 crore and more. So generally, I would say mutual funds is for small investors, and for high net worth individuals, it is alternate investment fund. That is one difference. Second difference is mutual funds invest in traditional instruments like shares and bonds. Alternate investment funds, on the other hand, makes investment in certain complex instruments. Like they might invest money in, let's say, venture capital funds. They can be hedge funds. So they are making investment in certain complex instruments. So you can just see here, just like a mutual fund, alternate investment fund will pull in money from domestic and foreign investors. It is registered as a trust or a company and it is regulated by SEBI, not RBI. It will in turn invest in different sectors. When I say different sectors, not necessarily in terms of shares, you must understand. It can invest in different forms, complex financial instruments, like it can make investment in infrastructure, real estate, startup companies, or MSMEs. For example, SEBI has categorized alternate investment funds into three categories. For example, you have category 1 alternate investment fund, which is investing in early stage projects which are socially and economically desirable. Something which we think it is good for the Indian economy. In such projects, if it is investing, then we call it as alternate investment fund. Best example of that, you can say venture capital fund, SME fund, small and medium enterprises fund, infrastructure fund. So they can make investment in different forms. Like they can be angel investors, which are investing in startups. They can give loans to these companies, right? They are not just in forms of shares and bonds. Category 2 alternate investment fund is a AIF, which is investing in the projects to meet their operational requirement. If there is already an existing project, to meet the operational requirement of existing project, if you're making investment, then it becomes category 2. Example being real estate fund or the debt fund. Category 3 is very complex, fund, which is called as hedge fund, which are investing in very risky instruments like I would say options, derivatives, futures, and so on. So that is what is AIF. In case of India, all of these AIF, like I said, they are registered with and regulated by SEBI and quite different from mutual funds. Next part is, in India, we have what is called as fund of funds. Fund of fund is a kind of alternate investment fund. It's an AIF only, but as an AIF, the fund of funds is investing in other alternate investment fund. I told you, alternate investment fund pulls in money from different investors. So it is pulling in money from investor A, investor B, investor C. The fourth investor in this case is a fund of fund. So fund of fund is making investment in another alternate investment fund. So because it is making investment in another AIF, this fund of fund, we also call it as fodder fund. And the AIF which receives funding from fund of funds, that AIF we call it as a daughter fund. So AIF 1 and AIF 2, they are called as daughter funds because they get funding from the fund of funds. In India, government has set up certain fund of funds. You can see fund of funds for startups. It is set up by SIDBI. Then there is electronics development fund. Then there is fund of fund for MSMEs, which was set up during COVID-19. With respect to fund of fund for startups, what this fund of fund for startups does is, it is set up by government. It is managed by SIDBI. This fund of fund will invest in alternate investment funds, multiple alternate investment fund. And because we are investing in startups, This alternate investment fund should be called as venture capital fund. So it is investing in multiple venture capital fund. Now think of AIF1 and AIF2. Are they getting money only from fund of funds? No, right? They are getting money from another investors also. That is what is a fund of fund for startups. Already we have established a fund of fund for startups. What the finance minister has now announced is another fund of fund for the startups. A new fund of fund for the startups has been announced. You can see here a new fund of fund for startups to be established. Based upon that, let's look at the practice questions here. With respect to AIFs, consider the following statements. The AIFs are pooled investment vehicles which mobilize money from both domestic and foreign investors. It is right. The income earned by AIFs is generally taxed in the hands of AIFs and not investors. I told you that this year budget has given clarity with respect to taxation of category 1 and category 2 AIF. What is category 1 and category 2? Category 1 is early stage projects. Category 2 is those AIFs which are investing to meet operational requirements of existing projects. So what is this clarity? Let's understand here. So let's say there is an AIF. It has pulled in money from the investors and it has made investment. And on that investment, it has made profit. Now, the question is, when it makes profit, in whose hands the profit should be taxed? That is, who should pay the profit? The tax. Should the tax be paid by alternate investment fund, or should the tax be paid by the investors? So, for category 1, AIF1 and category 2 AIF, they enjoy what is called as pass-through taxation. Pass-through taxation means if these two categories of AIF earn a profit of 100 crore, this profit is actually given back to the investors, right? All these investors will get back the money. So government has clarified that when they earn profit, that is AIF 1 and 2, when they earn profit, the profit will not be taxed in the hands of AIF. Rather, it will be taxed in the hands of the investors. That's the first clarity. Second clarity is, if investors are getting the profit, some of these investors can be institutions, right? Let's say there's a bank here. So this institution can also make investment in AIF. So when institutions are getting profits from AIF, should this profit be considered as business income? Or should this profit be considered as capital gains? So earlier there was a confusion among the investors. Investors knew that they have to pay the tax. But what should they account this profit as? They should account it as business income or capital gains tax. This confusion was creating problem because if they account it as business income, they would have to pay higher tax. If they account it as capital gains, they have to pay low tax. So obviously, if I am one of the institution which is investing in alternate investment fund, and if I'm getting profit and on that profit I'm required to pay tax, I would want that it should be considered as a capital gains and not as business income. Government has finally sought to give clarity on this issue. In this year's budget, the government has said if investors are getting money from alternate investment fund, that is profit. That profit they have to account it as capital gains and not business income. So I would say it's a good news for the investors in AIF, because if they start accounting it as capital gains, they'll have to pay less tax, which is good. So read the second statement. The income earned by AIFs is generally taxed in the hands of AIFs, which is incorrect. They are not regulated by RBI. Answer is one only. Next practice question 25. Which among the following best describes the difference between mutual fund and alternate investment funds? So if you see the difference here, the best answer among all the four options is actually C. The minimum investment in AIFs is generally higher as compared to mutual funds, and hence AIFs are more suited to high net worth individuals. That is the right answer. Coming to the last part of a discussion, it is with respect to R&D ecosystem. So what I have done with respect to R&D ecosystem, from the economic survey, I have highlighted what are the trends in terms of R&D expenditure in India. That's the first thing. Second, I have also highlighted as to who is making more expenditure on research and development, whether it's public or the private sector. These are the trends which I have incorporated from the economic survey. So based upon this particular discussion, which I've incorporated in the PPT, please try to go to the discussion and you can try to solve this particular practice question number 26. From the perspective of mains, I have also framed a mains practice question, and the discussion to that mains practice question I have highlighted in the form of a flowchart as well. I hope you should be able to go through this, right? In case if you have any doubts, you can drop me a message in the comment section. I will obviously get back to you and solve your doubt. So finally, we have come to the end of the discussion of part 5. Next week, I will be discussing the last part of the budget and economic survey, which includes inclusive growth, infrastructure, and services. Thank you so much. Keep studying.